Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program. It is Perspective once again on a Thursday morning. Lovely to have you with us on the show. And do remember, we are here for the entire hour. In the first part of the show, we'll be talking to someone called Tarryn Mason. She's with the training facility called Progressions. In the second part of the program, we're going to be looking at a training program which UXA is introducing, and Mohammed Chunara will be in studio to unpack that in much detail. But first up, Tarryn Mason from Progressions, a training facility based in Lyndhurst in Johannesburg. Let me first welcome you, Tarryn. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Let's go way back to the year 2002 when Beth Cook was inspired to show South African businesses just how much value people with disabilities could add to their organizations. Beyond the obvious empowerment angle, she identified the business case that could be made where companies could focus equally on people and profit whilst reaching their transformation goals. That was a very powerful statement. Way back in 2002, lots of people weren't sure how that would pan out. When we look at BEE, BEEE, and all of that plays into this paragraph that I've read here. So how do you fit in? Were you around in 2002 when she made that statement?
No, not long after did I join the organization. I joined in 2008. Okay. So I'm going on 15, 16 years at Progression. But I started off at Progression in the recruiting of the candidates. And then I moved over to the project management. And since then, I now am the MD at Progression. So yes, I started off as in trying to understand the type of people we wanted to be participating in on the programs that we offer.
Congratulations, 20 years on. I understand Progressions has celebrated its 20th anniversary. You joined them, obviously, a little after they had started up. But I also understand that there were 3 women involved in the initial stages. Who are those women and are they still around?
Yes, Beth and Zarina, so Beth Cook and Zarina Bulbulia are still around. Unfortunately, their partner, Stacey, is no longer with them. She's gone on to a different adventure, but she left the organization probably back in 2007. So when she left, I came in and I joined the organization.
So the organization's being run by 3 amazing women. Let's start with you, Tarryn Mason. Who are you? And you're going to share a little bit of insights into the other 2 ladies, Beth Cook and Zarina Bulbulia. And then we'll talk about Progressions. And I'm certain our viewers are wondering, what is this Progressions training facility all about? Well, simply put, it is a training facility for adults with disabilities. And this discussion we're having here today follows on the interview we did last week with the Shadili family, Fatima and Hassan Taha, and they kept on raving about this training facility that Taha is attending. And I thought, well, we need to talk with the people at Progressions and let the whole world know what they're all about. So back to you, and who are you? What's your role at Progressions, apart from being the managing director, and then the other 2 ladies as well?
Sure. So my background was never going to be in the disability space. I actually am a qualified accountant. But when I started moving into the recruitment side of at Progression, let me start back. I actually came from corporate and I wanted to move away from corporate. I wanted to move into an environment that fed my soul. And I could make a difference. And so when I started working for Progression, I worked in the recruitment space, and I started to get to know the individuals that we were working with. And from there, I progressively moved up into the role that I am now. And in the role that I am now, yes, you can call myself the managing director, but I see myself as the person that kind of holds everything together. And what's nice about it is I get to interact with the candidates, and I interact with the training side, and I interact with the corporate side. So I get to see it all kind of come together. Whereas working with the other two ladies, I've the absolute privilege to work with the two of them. Zarina, when she first started at Progression, she also came from corporate, and I think for her, it was equally important for her to move into an environment where she can make a difference in the average South African's life. For Beth Cook, our founder, she's amazing. She saw a gap in the market. She knew that people with disabilities were not being considered for skills, to being given the right skill set to be able to work in the open labour market, but also given the opportunity to find jobs. And when she found Progression, we were one of the first organisations to work with people with disabilities to be able to integrate them into corporate South Africa. And she took the step, she quit her job, she started the business, and we're 21 years down the line, and which is amazing.
And long may you live and continue touching lives in a very positive way. You mentioned the word mental health just a little while ago in the course of your response to me. How does that play into the Progression's model? Because when we talk disability, it's not necessarily mental health issues. It probably is disabilities of another type, possibly physical. Can you tell us exactly what sort of disabilities are you talking about at Progressions, or the different types that you've come across in all of these years at Progressions?
Sure. So when we first started, we consider all types of disabilities, whether you are physical or you have a mental disability. Probably back 10 years ago, we found that we're working with mostly physical disabilities, but that over the years has since changed. And it's changed in a way, and I'm sure it's also because of COVID and economic standing in South Africa and the pressures of South Africa. Mental health is on the rise, and we're now it's swung. And we're now working mostly with mental disabilities more than we are physical disabilities. The types of mental disabilities that we look at are things like your chronic depressions, bipolar mood disorder, schizophrenia, those types of disabilities. A little bit of intellectual disabilities, but to be able to train on some of the programs that we offer, intellectual disabilities are a little bit hard to be able to grasp the training programs. So we always look at more the mental disabilities that affect your cognitive thinking, processing, and emotional train of thought.
So you're working with people who do have obviously, mental health issues.
That's right.
And other people that may have physical disabilities.
That's
I'm trying to kind of imagine the space you're in and how you manage the different personalities, the different disabilities. And in terms of the mental health, not the mental health, health regulations, workmen's, you know what I'm referring to,
yes.
that specific act that enables you to actually oversee the safety of the people on your premises.
Yeah.
You know which act I'm referring to?
So from occupational health and
there
safety.
You go, yes.
Yes.
So how restrictive are those acts in terms of your day-to-day running of the organisation?
They're not really restrictive at all, because the way we operate is we assess everyone. Everyone that comes into our environment, we assess. And we don't see as anyone that comes into our environment is limited. We rather put things in place to remove those limitations. We are pretty accessible, so we have accessible bathrooms, we have lifts, we have probably more first aiders than any other organisation. But we also have a lot of counsellors. So we have a few counsellors, OTs, and people that support all the individuals that are in our space. So we don't see ourselves as limited. It might also be because we've been doing this for so long, it's just habit, and it's our way of life. So we can accommodate anyone. How we accommodate everyone is, like I said, we do a functional assessment, and what we call is reasonable accommodation. We put things in place to remove the barriers so that they can operate at their full capacity.
I'm just wondering, with these different personality types, mental health issues, etc. You mentioned schizophrenia, you mentioned bipolar, and so forth. Have you ever had meltdowns on the premises whilst the people, the learners, students are at school, and how do you manage it? And also, what about, you spoke about having counsellors on the premises all of the time? Are they full-time employees? So think about what I've just, thrown at you. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And will you please respond right after the ad break?
Sure.
Tarryn Mason is my guest on the show this morning. We're talking about Progressions. It is a facility that accommodates people with disabilities and, of course, mental health issues. They're based in Lyndhurst, Johannesburg. And Tarryn is here to tell us all about it and much, much more. And it's really very encouraging knowing that there is such a facility available on our doorstep. All of that and much more after the ad break. Welcome back, and I was having a hearty conversation with Tarryn, and I sometimes think that the off-air discussions here in studio are more interesting than the on-air ones. But let me not put you off. This is a very interesting discussion. It is important, and we need to make ourselves knowledgeable about the facilities available to us as a community. Back to you, Tarryn, and I gave you 2 questions to respond to, and would you like to, please?
Sure. So you first mentioned the meltdown and the different personalities within our organisation.
Clashing, etc.
Yes, totally. We do. What we would consider, especially from a person with a mental health diagnosis, we would consider it often a relapse. And we see it sometimes, often, because we have counsellors in our space and we're constantly supporting the individual, we can almost predict it's going to happen because we can start to see personality changes, and we try nip it in the bud as soon as possible.
So you see that behaviour,
yes,
you realise.
And we realise this person's on the verge of a relapse. We need to maybe try intervene prior to the relapse. But then there's often cases where that we don't get it in time and the person does relapse, and there's some strange behaviours or things that happen in our environment that we have to manage. And if that's the case, we try to get them help as soon as possible. The problem comes in is that majority of the candidates that we work with are from such severe disadvantaged backgrounds. They don't have medical aid and they rely on government healthcare. And to get them into a government healthcare facility where they need to see psychiatrists and things like that, they go on waiting lists. And so that is where it's difficult. And more often than not, it's just trying to understand where the person's at, and maybe it's medication or something that needs to be adjusted or changed.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual facility, the type of training that's being offered. How many graduates have you had? Are they well entrenched in the workplace situation? So what specific training do you offer, and for how long does the training run?
Okay, so majority of our training is corporate funded. So what we try to do is we match a corporate to the individual that comes into our space. And then they have theoretical training and they have a workplace component as well. The theoretical training basically the full qualification lasts 12 months and they get a qualification at the end. We offer a variety of qualifications, anything from your business administrations all the way to IT, end user computing, technical support, systems development. We also do craft production, which is a very nice program. We're currently running, we have a enterprise hub, which is a sewing hub, and we have a ceramics hub that the craft production kind of works quite well there, especially for individuals that struggle in an environment that require like to go into a formal workplace environment where, and also if they don't stay by us, then we're offering them a skill that nobody can take away from them. So and with graduates, I think we've had about 7,500, maybe if not more, maybe closer to 10,000 over the last 20 years. Do they all get employed? Unfortunately, not all get employed, but they do. But a good, at probably say about 10 years ago, 60 to 70% of the candidates that are coming through our system were being permanently employed. But I'd say since after COVID, that's dwindled a little bit.
Do they keep in touch, or do you keep in touch to kind of track their progress?
We do. Also, what's nice, what we try to do is we try career path them as much as we possibly can. And when I say career path, they may do a level 1 qualification this year and they were star performers. We try to get them to move up to level 2, 3, 4, 5, so that they can walk away with not just a low-level qualification, but a level qualification that's equivalent to a diploma, which is something if you have a grade 11 to get to a diploma level, it's a huge milestone in your life. Yeah, it's a huge skill.
So I'm wondering, obviously people watching us this morning would really feel like they know someone in their lives that could benefit from a program like yours. And of course, a lot of people would be interested in joining Progressions. The criteria, obviously, is quite stringent, I should imagine, because you need to make sure you've got the right people on board and you're partnering them with the right corporates as well, because it is, let's face it, a costly venture.
Yes. So our main requirement is the person's got to be work ready. So we look at if it's a person that has a mental disability, that they are compliant to medication, that there is a verified diagnosis, and that they have a minimum of a grade 11. Sometimes we've even looked at grade 10, but a minimum of a grade 11. And that is probably the entry requirement. From there, we take it to the next step. We interview and we assess the individual. We assess their disability as well to see where they're at and if they are stable on medication and they are stable in the environment to be able to enter in the workplace. And that's basically our requirement.
Age groups, start and cut-off ages.
18. Most corporates look from anything between 18 and 35, but we go from 18 up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People who have been with you in the past and go out and work, drop out of the workspace for whatever reason, they may have had relapse or just did not fit into that environment, and then perhaps come back to you, knock on your door and say, I need a second chance. Do you re-look at them? I should imagine a lot of assessments would have to be done and references needs to be obtained from the employer to indicate what exactly the problem was. That's question number one. And question number two, is there a situation where the situation is so bad with a particular individual that you have to say, I'm sorry, we can't help you?
Okay. So to answer the first question, yes, we have. Depending on the circumstances, we've obviously had minor circumstances that have happened, minor relapses, minor things that have happened to the individual that it's easy to reassess. Hopefully that they've been through some medical help and received treatment, and that psychiatrist will be able to say to us, yes, they are fit for work and we can reevaluate them. We'll reassess and replace. But there's also been circumstances where we have to, unfortunately, walk away. And the reason for it is often we find that sometimes the workplace is sometimes an enabler. I hope I'm making sense. When I say an enabler, the person's compliant and is stable outside the workplace, but the moment the pressures of the workplace are in place, and it becomes that we find that they relapse more because now they're in a working environment and something that they're not used to, then we have to turn around and go, unfortunately, the person's not fit for work.
I guess it's issues around anxiety, issues around personality clashes in the workplace,
Yes.
too much pressure, the person second guessing themselves that, am I in the right environment? I'm never going to get through here. And possibly, sadly, the sad reality is people with disabilities are bullied. They are victims of bullies, not only in their own families, perhaps, but in the workspaces, in school. I mean, schools are notorious for people with disabilities being bullied. How do you at Progressions try and address that situation? Because you do need to brief them about what they're going to face when they go out into the real world.
Well, that's part of one of our offerings. What we do is, especially from a corporate perspective, we do a lot of awareness and sensitization training around disability management and how to manage disability in the workplace. The biggest thing about training people with disabilities in our workplaces is that we've got to try change the corporate mindset that we're all human. And a disability is not discriminatory. It doesn't just choose, oh, just because this person comes from this background, that this is the person that's going to have a disability. It can choose you at any given point in time in your life. So you yourself need to be accepted. If you happen to be a person with a disability later on in life, you surely would hope that the person that you're working with is going to accept you. And the same applies to the individuals that you're entering into the workspace. You want to equally give them the same opportunity because it's not something that they asked for. It just happens.
Believe it or not, 2 minutes to wrap up time. What are the challenges at Progressions, and how do you believe, you can circumvent them? And just from what I hear, you're offering an amazing opportunity at an amazing facility. But surely there must be challenges. How do we help for you to overcome those?
Oh, it's very difficult because I don't know if we're going to always overcome some of the challenges. I think the biggest one is mindset. Probably the best question you ask is that how do corporates or how do people change their mindset? Changing people's mindsets, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. The other one is I don't think we need to fear disability, and I don't think we need to fear them being in this space. So I think it's a stigma, and we need to change the mindset. So that's probably our biggest challenge. And also, people need to just start opening their doors to accepting these people in their space.
Sadly, that's the sad reality of not only in South Africa, but all around the world.
Totally.
Simply because people don't understand what a specific disability is all about. And I think once we start empowering ourselves, understanding, educating, those stigmas will then, drop away, and we can better interact with people with disabilities. Final words from you, Tarryn.
I just think this is such an awesome opportunity to talk about it. I really appreciated the fact that more than anything that you had Mohammed and his mom on the show a week ago. It's just, I think, gives such a good insight to I know it's their story, but there are many. He's one of hundreds that are out there that need support and need consideration.
Yeah. Tarryn Mason, you are one of a few amazing women at Progressions and out there in the world trying to make a difference. You are making a difference.
Thank you.
You guys are making a positive difference in lives. And testimony to that is my guests from last week, Fatima and Mohammed Shadili. Please continue doing what you're doing. You're making a huge difference. God bless. Thank you for being here.
Awesome pleasure. Thank you.
There you have it. Our first guest is on her way, Tarryn Mason, the MD of Progressions, and it's a training facility specifically targeted at people with disabilities, any form of disabilities. Hope you've enjoyed that, and I do hope that if you know of someone who has a disability and hasn't been given a fair shot at life, these are the people you need to get hold of. Progressions, you can Google them. They're based in Lyndhurst, in Johannesburg. Welcome back to the second hour of the show. This is Perspective with me, Julie Ali, and our next guest, second time around, I'm having him on the show. He is Mohammed Coovadia. He is at Kurtuba, but he is also with UXA. Now, the reason he's here with us today is that UXA and its partners will be hosting an exciting online training session titled Same Sex Attractions and Gender Dysphoria 101 Training, an expert guide for ulama, teachers, parents, and all. And this, of course, as we had discussed previously with Mohammed, is a very important discussion. And those of you who are available, we would urge you to try and sign up for this training session. It will be done via Zoom. Mohammed will give us all of those details. And even if you're just a parent and not a professional person, I think arm yourself with this knowledge and know as a Muslim how you'd respond when you go out into public spaces and you are called out for your stance on LGBTQ, etc. So, Mohammed, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullahu khairan for having me again.
Wonderful to have you here because this is important. And I'm so pleased that UXA, alhamdulillah, the United Ulama Council of South Africa, is embarking on this venture, on this initiative, because we do need to speak with one voice. We can't have people from the community going in different directions, saying different things out there, and just confusing and conflating the issue, and then people are more confused than they've ever been in the past. So when is this training happening? As I have indicated in the introduction, it's targeted mainly at teachers, but of course it would do us as ordinary people of the community to join in and get a better, deeper, and overall understanding of the issue at hand.
No, definitely. I think although it is guided towards, ulama, which is Islamic scholars, teachers, educators, parents, it's open to all because we all challenge with this issue. Anyone could be approached by a person. Now, just to give a bit of insight into exactly what the training is about, is specifically looking at it from a counseling perspective. And we're looking in terms of what are the causes of same-sex attractions, and together with it also, how do we assist people who come to us and approach us with unwanted same-sex attractions or gender dysphoria. These are people who don't want to embrace it as part of their identity, but rather they want to move past it. And any person could be approached by such an individual, and therefore this specific topic is relevant to everyone. I think that's why it's really important if a person does have the time and the capacity to attend, then attend. And although we're specifically looking at same-sex attractions and gender dysphoria, a lot of the discussion is actually practical to our life, our daily life as well. The same way you would help a person who approaches us with same-sex attractions or gender dysphoria, we would also assist another person as well. When they approach us with anxiety, depression, it's very similar. Yes, there are certain differences, but I think there's practicality for everyone.
You talk about gender dysphoria. It seems to be the new buzzword in these circles. Just explain that in detail, please.
Okay, so when we're looking at the word gender dysphoria, we don't actually mean the American Psychiatric Association's definition or terminology that is used within the DSM-5, which is a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, 5, the text revision. Rather, we just refer to it as any person who feels that their born sex is different to that of their gender expression. So any person who feels that their gender and their sex is different, their biological sex, that would be a person we refer to as gender dysphoria. The reason for that is we don't want to adopt the words of transgenderism. We don't want to adopt the words of non-binary. We don't want to adopt the words of queer identity. Because as a Muslim...
Why not?
Very good question. So I think as a Muslim, we need to get our narrative correctly. We don't believe in something being part of a person's identity. If a person has attractions for the same gender, we don't believe that that person becomes gay because that means it's part of their identity. We don't believe an action defines you as a person. Similarly, if a person thinks that their gender is different to what their sex is, we don't believe that that becomes part of your identity. That's just a characteristic maybe of yours or behavior of yours.
And obviously, the whole intent with UXA and all of the other role players in this initiative is to assist those people, to try and assist them medically, I should imagine, physically, mentally, spiritually, and even emotionally. Because if you don't do that, the person's going to go through life being very confused or ending up in a same-sex relationship, which we as Muslims don't, obviously according to Sharia, is totally wrong, not acceptable. So we need to help people to possibly identify who and what they are, inshallah, and then lead a normal life as they possibly can.
I think that's why we're looking at it specifically and we're saying unwanted same-sex attractions or gender dysphoria. Here we're not speaking about a person who approaches us and they want to actually embrace these feelings as part of their identity. That, of course, in Islam is not allowed, but at the same time, from a constitutional perspective, or even from a religious perspective, we can't force people to do specific actions. That person will leave them on the side. Here we're speaking about a person who wants to overcome those desires. And unfortunately, if you go into Western societies, and even you go to a general psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, they don't give people that autonomy. They say that, yes, even though you want to maybe overcome it, embrace it. And that's where we want to step in and say, there's a difference.
In all fairness, then, someone comes to you or comes to UXA and says, this is my situation. I want to embrace it. You would then probably counsel them and tell them why you believe it's wrong. But if they very insistent on leading that lifestyle, there's nothing more you can do. You have to walk away from that particular person. But if the person says, help me, I'm so confused. I've got a female body, but I have these type of tendencies towards other females. Help me overcome this. How do we then help them? How does UXA help them? Because I should imagine, apart from mental support, there would be and should be some form of medical intervention as well. I think balancing of hormones, etc. How is UXA going to approach those issues?
So in terms of our counseling protocols, we have a free counseling center. What happens is we do 8 free counseling sessions, unless, of course, a need arises for additional sessions, then we would look into that. From those 8 sessions, the first 2 sessions are normally used just to build rapport with the client, and together with that, also understand the presenting problem of the client. Now, if the issue is stemming from a hormonal perspective, then, of course, we would require maybe medical intervention. If it's stemming maybe, for example, from an environmental perspective, maybe it's self-doubt, a confidence issue, maybe it's a parental perspective where we have a mother who is overprotective over their child and a father who is distant from the child. Then, of course, we look at it from a counseling perspective. And that's where we'll actually then create an intervention plan for the client. And within the next 6 sessions, we would then, of course, intervene and try and assist the client to the best of our ability.
In this day and age, we do know that a lot of young people seem to think that they know it all. And we also have Dr. Google. So rather than going to a counselor or to a doctor, they'll just Google all the information and think that I've got this. I don't need to go to UXA. I don't need to go to a counselor. And in most cases, when you self-diagnose, it can go horribly wrong. How do you attract people or talk with people, young people, to say, come on board, this counseling will help you understand where you're at in life, and then we can hold your hand through the process?
Look, I think actually I would just slightly disagree with you on that one there, because what we've noticed is that youngsters, when they have these initial attractions, many of them are actually taught from an Islamic perspective that this is incorrect. So there's a cognitive dissonance here, where their belief systems differs from what they are feeling inside, and they feel extremely confused and they're looking for help. The problem is they don't feel comfortable going to an educator, going to their parents, going to an alim, an Islamic scholar, so and tell them that this is what I am experiencing out of fear of judgment. That just now they say it's because of a weakness of your faith, or you've done something wrong. For many of these people, they haven't necessarily done something wrong from their side.
And you're giving them all the wrong advice.
Exactly.
And making them feel worse than they're actually feeling in that moment. So it's vital that this type of training and counseling and support gets off the ground ASAP. How are you reaching out to young people? How are you getting the word out there that this is what we're offering, this is open to our community, and please approach us. We can hold your hand through the process.
So look, it is a fairly new initiative. And therefore, we haven't ideally marketed marketed it like how we wanted to. But what we have decided is we want to actually target key stakeholders. That's why we're targeting ulama, we're targeting parents, we're targeting teachers. Because a lot of these youngsters actually approach an ali, maybe a teacher or their parents, and they are the first point of contact. So if they know where they can actually refer the people who come to them, then hopefully that will be more productive than actually trying to target every individual youngster. So that's the plan. The short-term goal is first to target the key stakeholders, and then from there branch out onto the actual population, that is the youngsters and those people who are struggling.
And by way of this program, obviously, you'd be able to get these very subtle messages across in schools, madrasas, etc., so that the young people do know that there is help available. But we do need to go for our first ad break. When we come back, we're going to try and unpack the rest of the training and when and where it's happening, inshallah. I'm talking with Mohammed Coovadia. He is with UXA, and we are talking about the training, the same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria 101 training, an expert guide for ulama, teachers, parents, and all. So please stay with us. We're going to unpack all of that and more in the next segment. Welcome back. I am talking with Maulana Mohammed Coovadia. He is Amir of UXA's SSA and GD Counselling Committee, and that's exactly what we're talking about on the show today. Welcome back, and let's start. There's 5 points in particular that UXA is targeted to cover in this upcoming training, and it's really very, very important. It's the key target areas that needs to be understood. The first one being uncovering the Islamic perspective on SSA and GD. Please unpack that for us.
So here specifically, we're looking at understanding the Islamic perspective of LGBTQ or same-sex attractions and gender dysphoria. I think many people get it wrong, where they understand that it's impermissible, but that's about it, full stop. They don't understand what happens if a person has thoughts but doesn't actually act out on those thoughts. Is that permissible? Is the person actually rewarded for it? And yes, the person is actually rewarded because that is a struggle of theirs. So here when we're speaking about the Islamic perspective, the Islamic stance, people shouldn't think that, it's the usual bayan we get maybe of these ayat, and this is the story of Lut alayhi salam, and that's sufficient enough. Here we actually want to hone into the various aspects surrounding that. Also, for example, how do we interact with people of different faiths who do actually come from this community? This is a reality in a workplace, that we are going to be faced with these situations. How do we as Muslims, we can't be expected to be hostile to them. That's not allowed in Islam as well. So when we look at the Islamic stance, we look at it from a very holistic perspective.
Alhamdulillah. You're also going to be looking at delving into Islam's paradigm of health and pathology.
So the reason for actually going to the health and pathology aspect is many people still have this misconception that same-sex attractions or gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And they often quote, as I said, the DSM-5 and the previous versions of it. And even Islamic scholars do this. But that's a very Western understanding of this entire perspective. Islam never ever viewed it as a psychopathology, as a spiritual illness. Just like how anger, just like how if a person has to be attracted to the same sex, to a different sex, but has a compulsion, meaning they're in a marriage, but they still cannot control themselves and still has illicit relationships. We don't say they're suffering from a clinical pathology, but they are, from an Islamic perspective, actually suffering from a spiritual pathology. So I think it's very important for us to actually understand, where does it sit on the spectrum? Is it incorrect? We know it's incorrect, but to quote and say that it's a psychopathology and to say that these people are mental, crazy, that's actually quite un-Islamic as well.
So let's talk about the issue around the spiritual understanding when we look at people with these type of feelings and the spaces they find themselves in. Why do we use the terminology that it is spiritual? Just unpack that more, because a lot of people seem to think, like you've indicated, mental health issue, a physical, it might be something to do with the physical, their physical state of being. It might also be a situation of environment. And I'd also like you to talk about environment, how the environment influences these type of activities.
So I think it's a bit of short time to actually unpack the entire thing, but that's the purpose of our webinar. But I will just touch on like the key aspect in terms of why is it actually a spiritual pathology and not a mental illness. So if we look at Islam's conceptualization of human pathology or health, it sits on a scale. So on the one extremity, we have a clinical range of something. So let's take a simple example of narcissistic behavior, all right, which is known also in Arabic as i'jabun nafs, having a extremely inflated self-image. So on a clinical range, that would be where a person cannot even interact. The interpersonal relationships are now problematic because of their narcissistic traits. Their human functioning becomes diminished. Occupational opportunities also become diminished because they're so self-inflated. They have a narcissistic type. So that would be a clinical range. Then Islam says there's something which is a spiritual range. Spiritual pathology is something which isn't a clinical pathology as yet, but Islam still says it's something bad. So if a person believes that I'm better than you, if you go to a psychologist and you just go say that, hey, I believe I'm better than Julie Ali, the psychologist won't see that to be a problem. But if you go to an Islamic psychologist, they should see that to be a problem because from an Islamic perspective, we shouldn't believe ourselves to be better than anyone. So that would be a spiritual pathology. It's not a clinical where it doesn't impact on my functioning. I'm still able to come on Hilaal TV. I'm able to function correctly, but it is a spiritual pathology. And Islam, in fact, takes it further. Then you get a normal range. That would be where I don't believe myself to be better than anyone, but at the same time, I don't believe that anyone is better than me. And
How
then-
about, let me stop you there, and I know we are running out of time. How about people who feel lesser for whatever reason, lesser than other people? Maybe it was an impact from their upbringing. The parents kind of marginalized that child because he was not fair enough, or he just was not as clever enough as his other siblings, and everyone kept putting him down, him or her, and they now feel so diminished, absolutely no self-worth or self-esteem. How does Islam then deal with a person like that?
It's a very complicated and a complex one, and I actually like it because from an Islamic perspective, and that's what I was going to say, actually, it's saintly rank. To believe that other people are better than me from an Islamic perspective is actually something good. We shouldn't believe ourselves to be better than others. We should actually believe that that person there, they have qualities that are better than me. But at the same time, there's a difference. One is putting other people above us. The second thing is putting you below everyone else. We shouldn't put ourselves lower than others, but we should put others above us. I know it's a very fine
No,
line.
I hear you. I'm just saying that it's going to be difficult for that person because they're going to reach a point where they're going to feel worthless.
Correct.
And once you feel worthless, you kind of feel life has no meaning. And we need to also address those type of issues because
Correct.
those are the issues which lead to suicide, doesn't it?
Correct, and that's exactly the point. I mean, we shouldn't believe. For a Muslim to believe that they are worthless as well is problematic because we are a creation of Allah. We are a slave of His. That alone should give us such glory and joy. So to believe, and especially as a ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to have this inferiority complex, and that's what I actually think currently in the Muslim community. What if I had to diagnose a Muslim community on a large scale, and it's not actually myself, I read it from another Muslim psychiatrist who said this, is they would actually diagnose the entire ummah with an inferiority complex.
Inferiority? I thought it was the opposite.
No, I think we believe ourselves to be weaker than others. We believe ourselves, we always believe the West to be, and it's the African thing, I think, actually. The African context in entirety believes themselves to be less superior than the West. So that's also problematic, and I
And
definitely
that's
agree
because
with you.
of the years of apartheid that we were subjugated
Correct.
to, and the whole story around colonialism, etc. But we're drifting from the subject. Let's get back to what else is going to be unpacked in the training.
So the other thing which we are going to be speaking about is also understanding the genesis and the causes of same-sex attractions. So looking from a biological perspective, from a gene perspective as well, together with that looking from an environmental perspective, and then of course from an Islamic perspective in terms of satanic influences in it as well. So understanding.
How important is that? Because a lot of times when we as Muslims are not able to overcome our problem people in our lives, we try and try and try, eventually give up and think that there's something more serious at play here. It might be gene, it might be jadoo, etc. So when and where do we start exploring that avenue regarding the healing of our loved one?
So you see, the reality is there's an amalgamation of aspects. So I mean, all of these things come together and combine, and that's why I said in our 8 sessions, we normally do the first 2 sessions just understanding the presenting problem and gaining a full understanding of everything that's happening surrounding that specific individual. Knowledge is the only thing which can actually differentiate it. It has to be done by a qualified individual from an Islamic perspective to see the behavior, see how it's actually playing out. There are books that are written on it, but as I said, it's a very complex thing. Just to say that there's one indication to show that it's a psychological thing or whether it's a spiritual thing is not possible. There's various factors, and that has to be done by a qualified individual.
We've got 1 minute left to wrap up time. What do you want to tell us very quickly about this training? How do we, link up to the training? Is there also an in-house classroom type of session that's going to happen? And then other people from all around the country can Zoom in.
So it's only going to be done online via Zoom. If a person does want to register, they can go to UCSA's website. That is www.ucsa.co.za. The training is taking place next week, Saturday, the 11th of November, from 9:30 to 12:30. Alternatively, a person can also email us at counseling, that's double L, South African English, at ucsa.co.za.
And 1 or 2 of the speakers that are going to be presenting, who would they be?
Okay, so we have one Mufti from MJC, we have myself, and we have also a psychiatrist who is also an alim from Durban, Dr. Ibrahim Seder, and inshallah, 3 of us will be speaking.
Alhamdulillah. Wonderful to have you on the show once again. And I do know that it's going to go very well. And I hope and pray, inshallah, that people in South Africa, our community, do actually join this webinar because it's really very, very crucial, very important. But I'm sure that you have gotten all the Muslim schools on board, the teachers. So you're going to have a great turnout as in the webinar. And hopefully they can then pass on whatever they've heard and learned on this wonderful initiative. Jazakallah once again for being with us in studio, and all the very best. Shukran.
Ameen. Jazakallah khairah.
And that, of course, brings us to the end of the show today. I always say to my guests, there just is not enough time to cover absolutely everything that we want to go through. But inshallah, we'll have them on again at a later stage, possibly in the new year. Thank you so much for your company on the show this morning. I truly hope that you found the discussions helpful and give you some sort of insight as to what exactly is going on in our communities and the opportunities available to all of us, whatever our issues might be. On that note, then, we sign off with a big thank you to Tarryn and the rest of the production team. And it is, as always, Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.